It all started on a quiet Wednesday morning when the birds were chirping. My coffee was still steaming on the porch, and Max, my 100-pound Labrador Mastiff mix, was lounging lazily by my feet like the overgrown teddy bear he is, tongue hanging out, tail thudding slowly against the wood. Max has been my companion ever since I returned from active military service overseas. He's not just a pet, he's my registered emotional support animal, a calming presence in a world that sometimes feels like it's still on edge. But apparently Max's size wasn't just intimidating to squirrels and mail carriers. No, it triggered a much bigger problem in the form of the HOA president. Karen, she stormed up my driveway like she was invading Normandy, clutching her clipboard like it was a sword of justice, heels clicking like a countdown to chaos. "Excuse me, sir," she barked as Max lazily lifted his head. "This dog is not permitted in the neighborhood. He exceeds the 25-pound weight limit stated in our HOA guidelines." I blinked at her, amused and a bit annoyed, and calmly explained Max was a registered ESA, complete with documentation. She wasn't having it. Our rules override that. This is a family neighborhood. Large dogs are aggressive, a safety risk. She continued, pointing a red-tipped fingernail at Max like she expected him to lunge. Max yawned. I explained again, this time slower, as if I was teaching a child. Federal law protects emotional support animals under the Fair Housing Act, FHA, and no HOA rules can override that. Karen, red-faced and defiant, refused to listen. The very next day, I received a formal violation letter from the HOA demanding I remove Max within 10 days or face daily fines and legal action. My hands trembled with anger, not out of fear, but because this woman thought she was above the law. I pulled out my ESA paperwork, my VA records, and crafted a response letter citing federal law. I included copies of legal precedents where HOAs were forced to back down under similar circumstances. I even contacted a local disability rights attorney just in case. Karen doubled down. She organized a board meeting without informing me and brought up Max as a serious threat to the neighborhood's safety. I found out through a neighbor who disagreed with her methods and invited me to the next meeting. When I walked into the HOA clubhouse with Max at my side, heads turned. I calmly greeted everyone and sat down, Max curling up by my feet. Karen immediately demanded he be removed before the meeting could proceed. I stood, pulled out my documents, and said, "According to federal law, specifically the Fair Housing Act, your HOA cannot discriminate against individuals with disabilities, nor can you prohibit an emotional support animal, regardless of size or breed." The room went silent. I handed out printed packets to every board member. Karen tried to interrupt, but the HOA secretary, an older gentleman named Bill, raised his hand. "Let him finish," he said. I continued, outlining my legal rights, quoting HUD's exact guidance, and providing documentation that Max was not just legal, but protected. Karen's smug expression faded as Bill read through the packet and nodded. "He's right," he said finally. "We can't enforce this weight limit against an ESA." Karen fumed, lips pressed into a thin line. "Well then, maybe the law needs to be changed," she snapped. "I'm calling the county." "Go ahead," I said, "and I'll call the Department of Housing and Urban Development." "Want to see how that turns out?" The room chuckled quietly. She stormed out. A week later, I received a formal apology from the HOA and confirmation that Max would be allowed to stay without restrictions, but I wasn't done. I filed a complaint with HUD anyway, to make sure this kind of harassment wouldn't happen to anyone else in the neighborhood. 2 months later, the OA received a warning letter from HUD, reminding them of federal compliance requirements. Karen resigned shortly after, citing personal reasons. The neighborhood breathed a sigh of relief. Max still lounges on the porch every morning, tail wagging lazily, eyes half shut in peace. Sometimes neighbors stop by to pet him, and more than one has thanked me for standing up, not just for myself, but for anyone who might not know their rights. The best part? Max was voted neighborhood hero at the summer block party. Karen wasn't invited. The weeks after Karen's dramatic resignation were blissfully peaceful, no surprise inspections, No bogus citations about lawn length or mailbox color, and no sudden threats of fines delivered like hand grenades wrapped in official letterhead. But the calm was short-lived. A new HOA president was elected, Jeffrey, a real estate agent with slicked-back hair and an even slicker personality. He claimed he wanted to bring balance and professionalism to the HOA, but in reality he was Karen 2.0 with better branding. Though he didn't directly target Max like Karen did, it didn't take long for the passive-aggressive notes to start piling up again. Complaints about dog noise, property values, and potential liability all signed off with the OA logo and a cold smile of compliance. When I confronted Jeffrey in a board meeting about this subtle harassment, he smirked and said, "We're just trying to protect the community from lawsuits. Big dogs can intimidate people, especially kids." That comment lit a fuse I hadn't realized was still burning. I reminded him again of federal law, even brought a hard copy of the FHA and read the exact language. His response, "Well, maybe we need to consult our attorney." That was the moment I decided to stop playing defense. I contacted the same disability rights attorney I had spoken to earlier, and together we compiled a complete legal complaint not just against the HOA for harassment, but against individual board members who participated in discriminatory practices. I included statements from neighbors who had witnessed Karen's harassment, copies of every violation letter, email, and notice sent after her resignation, and even security footage showing HOA members taking pictures of Max from their cars, like stalkers in a B-grade spy movie. When the formal legal letter hit the HOA inbox, things changed fast. Jeffrey called an emergency meeting and invited me to attend, this time with their attorney present. I brought my own lauer, and the room turned into a legal seminar. Their attorney, clearly more experienced than Jeffrey or Karen ever were, admitted that the HOA had absolutely no grounds to regulate Max based on his weight or perceived threat, unless the dog has a documented history of aggression. He said, which he does not. The HOA is in violation of federal housing law and exposes itself to liability. I leaned in. How much liability exactly? My attorney answered before their lawyer could. Up to $16,000 per violation. More if it can be proven that this has been ongoing discrimination. Jeffrey looked like he'd swallowed a cactus. Their lawyer recommended the board settle immediately by ceasing all related correspondence and issuing a written apology. I agreed on one condition. They must revise the HOA rules and distribute a new handbook clarifying the protection of ESAs under federal law. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about making sure no one else would be bullied by ignorance and ego. 3 weeks later, every resident received a new handbook and a letter from the HOA stating their updated ESA policy, citing the FHA in bold at the top. Max became a local legend. A local reporter got wind of the story and featured us in a feel-good segment about veterans' rights and therapy animals. That segment was shared over 100,000 times on social media. A state senator even reached out, asking to use our story in a campaign about disability protections. As for Jeffrey, he stayed quiet for the rest of his term and didn't run again. I still live in the same house. Max still watches the world from the porch like a furry king on his throne, and our mailbox now holds more thank you notes than bills. Sometimes I think about Karen, wherever she ended up, maybe in another HOA, still clutching her clipboard of doom. But here, in this neighborhood, the law barked back, and for once, it barked louder than Karen ever could.